There are many types of people in the world, but it takes a special individual to welcome change. This change may come in the form of an alien culture, exploring a new cuisine, discovering your roots, or finding a new perspective on life. But no matter what form change may take, it has a certain way of bringing people together. I arrived in Tokyo, Japan, greeted by a bunch of strangers, all here for different reasons, all here looking for different experiences. As we smiled and traded pleasantries, I began to learn about my new classmates.
Hi!
When studying abroad, it's not uncommon to be asked why. Why are you studying abroad in Japan? I consistently found myself rehearsing the same answer, even to my peers who undoubtedly face similar lines of questioning. Although I hold no ancestral ties to Japan, I frequently replied with stories of my grandfather. In 1950, my grandfather joined the Navy at the age of 17. After receiving his training in Key West, Florida, his unit was shipped on a small freighter to the southern tip of Japan in Sapporo. He continued to move north through cities like Yokohama and Tokyo until he found his new home in Sapporo. Though living in Japan was a significant part of my grandfather's formative years, he rarely talked about his service while I was growing up. A single-rip Polaroid is the only record my grandfather has of living in Sapporo. But upon hearing about my decision to study abroad in Japan, he began sharing untold stories of his past, people he met, places he stayed, and the foreign culture he experienced. Just before I left, he gave me a map of Japan. On that map, he marked only two places with a simple dot: Tokyo and Sapporo. My grandfather made it my goal to visit both locations. Tokyo was the easier of the two to tackle first. Although our school was an hour train ride east of the city, IES quickly made it clear Tokyo was easily accessible. Taking a day to show us around, IES gave us time to socialize with our new classmates while introducing the complex train system of Tokyo.
Give us a smile, Alexia.
Alexia!
Alexia!
Before long, we were building friendships with each other and the Japanese students that attended our school. Much of our time was spent exploring Tokyo after the final class bell rang for the day. Although we found ourselves stumbling upon interesting sights on our own, there were some places only our Japanese friends could show us. Similarly, the IES staff exposed us to unique cultural experiences that we wouldn't have otherwise pursued independently. Taking field trips to cities like Hiroshima and Nikko reminded me I hadn't yet visited Sapporo, where my grandfather was once based. It took a bit of pushing by my girlfriend, but we eventually bought our tickets and made reservations for our stay. Sapporo was now a reality. After finishing class for the day, we headed to the airport where we waited in the small domestic terminal for our plane. I wish I could say boarding went smoothly, but I'd be lying.
You just threw out my boarding pass! You're such a dumbass!
As quick as we took off, we landed. By the time we arrived, it was dusk. We took the evening to eat and relax before exploring my grandfather's city. Sapporo was a decent-sized city, different than my grandfather had described. Trains were constantly flooding into the underground station. Cars and buses fought for dominance on the packed streets. Above our heads, the air was saturated with the constant noise from electric signs and billboards, advertising cafes, arcades, and shopping areas. It took a gondola ride up the tallest peak in Sapporo to truly understand how large the city was. The buildings appeared to go on and on. The sight was truly magnificent. This made me wonder, would my grandfather recognize the city? Would this sprawling skyline remind him of his days in the Navy? Much of the landscape was new. Even one of Sapporo's most iconic landmarks, the TV Tower, was constructed 4 years after my grandfather returned to the States. Sapporo felt like a city inhabited entirely by young, metropolitan people. The city did not feel like him. It did not reflect the stories he had told and the pictures he had painted in my mind. Sapporo truly was beautiful, but I did not see my grandfather in its liveliness. Even though I felt no connection with my grandfather during my visit, I found value in this trip for a different reason. This excursion taught me that each individual's study abroad experience hinges on the people you share your time with. Sapporo was a trip I enjoyed, not because of my grandfather, but because of everything I experienced with my girlfriend. We shared amazing food, sights, and culture with a picturesque backdrop.
Hiya.
Arriving back in Tokyo, I found that my realization was applicable to not just my separate trip, but to my experience as a whole. Would I have made it to Sapporo if I wasn't pushed to book a flight? Would I have discovered one of my favorite meals without my Japanese classmates to steer me in the right direction? Would I have been able to see as much of Japan without the help of our mentors? I feel I can comfortably answer these questions with no.
I can't do it! Stop!
Although I anticipated that visiting the cities alone would be impactful, it was the people I met and spent time with that were truly impactful. Now as I go through all the footage I shot while in Japan, I'm reminded of all the friends I made. These people will be friends for life, and people I hope to return to soon. Though we came to Japan for different reasons, we walked away with shared experiences that we wouldn't have had with anyone